Good day. Hopefully I've got these note sheets in the right order for you. We're looking at organic chemistry. This sheet is going to look a lot like what we talked about in the previous one, but then it's going to go in. It's going to start getting into the world of alkanes. So it reminds us that organic chemistry came from the word organism, and we know organic compounds contain carbon and hydrogen. They may contain other things, and if we have hydrocarbons, they'll only contain carbon and hydrogen. And there's our chains, rings, sheets, the special characteristics of carbon. We talked about all these weird and wonderful functional groups and other beasties, talked about isomers, reactions, polymers, blah, blah, blah. Now we look at Iupac, not the famous rap star who got gunned down in the 90s. That was Tupac, however you say it. Iupac, International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. So these are the characters who decided on a system of naming compounds so we can actually draw them. And your mission typically will spend more time on the naming because that's usually the harder part. But we want to put just enough information, but not too much, into naming each compound. And you can see it gets messy pretty fast. Here we have 5 carbons and 12 hydrogens. Here we have 5 carbons, 12 hydrogens. Here we have 5 carbons and 12 hydrogens. And we have to have some way of giving them different names. They all have the same molecular formula, but they have different structural diagrams. From the last chapter, you have to recognize that around each of these carbon, it's not square planar. These are each going to be tetrahedral. But this is often how we represent it because it's fairly straightforward on a piece of paper. So let's see what trouble we're in. Now, I'm going to give you the names of these, and it may or may not make sense. But right here we have 5 carbons. It turns out prefix for 5 is pent, and so we cleverly call this pentane. This is an alkane, pentane, 5 carbon. But now, when I look at this one, I have 4 carbons in my longest chain, and it turns out the prefix for 4 in organic is but, B-U-T. So this is going to be a butane, and it turns out a CH3 is a methyl, so this is going to be methyl butane. And in this case, I have 3 carbons a row. That's my longest chain of carbons. And so I say, oh, that looks like propane. And then I have a methyl up above, methyl down below, dimethylpropane. And you're saying, boy, isn't that easy? Well, you're probably not saying that. Do not panic. We will be going through it in all its glory. That's just to give you a preview of what we're up to. It's not going to be too bad. So, Iupac nomenclature. Nomenclature is a fancy way of saying naming system. We want, when we use a name, for it to have the same meaning around the planet. We want all scientists using the same rules for communicating about these kind of compounds. There's something called the functional group suffix. So if we're looking at an alkane, it will end in ane. If we look at an alkene, it will end in ene. If we're looking at alcohol, it'll end in -al. If we're looking at something like an aldehyde, it will end in -al. So that's what it's talking about. Suffix means at the end of the word. The root, well, that has the longest continuous chain of carbon atoms. And so the way I like people to remember it is we say, find the longest sausage. And you'll see why when we do some examples, we're actually attempt to write with a pen. Then we have something fancy called substituent prefix. So that means things that are stuck into our main chain. So it could be like a methyl, as we saw before. It could be a chlorine atom, so that'd be a chloro. Bromine would be bromo. My favorite is iodine, becomes iodo. And then we have things called multipliers and locants. Locant sounds like location, and yes, sometimes we have to say the location for a branch. So again, this is our overview. It's not going to make perfect sense yet. Do not panic. Is that it for that sheet? That is. Whoa, nice. So again, we are not into the meat of it. You're not expected to understand everything. We're still previewing things, getting your feet wet.